Welcome back to my channel, Famous and Fabulous. You won't believe what happened to the ancient aliens guy. On second thought, you might have guessed it. Depending on which side you're on about his super popular shows on History Channel, his stuff has been called silly. But he was still getting asked to speak at big universities and colleges. People who don't like him have pretty much called him a fake and think the experts on his shows are liars who are in on the trick. But his shows are still making new episodes after 20 years. This kind of attention has made Tsoukalos' memes spread all over the internet. However, what has shocked everyone is that he doesn't care at all. He just keeps making his stuff like he hasn't heard one word of hate. Now fans are starting to get worried and are asking things, like why doesn't he talk about the huge criticism, or answer questions about his work and beliefs that might show he's really real. For some people, Giorgio Tsoukalos is a truth finder, one of the few brave enough to spend his life lifting the cover from the eyes of the public so that they can see the truth about aliens from space. To others, he is a liar and a fake who's making as much money as he can from people's beliefs and not knowing better. So who is Tsoukalos really before he became the ancient aliens guy? Or has he always been the same person? Born in 1978 in Lucerne, Switzerland, Tsoukalos got half of his genes from his Greek father and the other half from his Austrian mother. However, the mix of his family didn't end here. He was an American thanks to his great-grandfather who came into the country during the late 1870s and his grandfather who stayed in the country, living in Brooklyn and in the Bronx for over 60 years. Even though Tsoukalos' father was third-generation Greek, he made sure that his young son never forgot his Greek roots. Even though the kid went to boarding schools, he knew a lot about Greek mythology. Falling in love with its sentient stories was easy, and the stars were soon added to his growing interest. Seeing the young boy's love for it, his grandmother gave him books that she thought he would enjoy. One of those books was Chariots of the Gods by Erich von Däniken. The book filled with stories of ancient technology, lost civilizations and gods from the sky was so interesting for Tsoukalos that he would remember it for years to come. The truth was this particular book had started a fire in him, a fire that would burn for the next couple of decades. However, for a while that fire was calmed down as Tsoukalos chose to study sports communication at Ithaca College in New York. Being super interested in stories, it probably wasn't a surprise that this was the path he took. After graduating from Ithaca in 1998 with a bachelor's degree in communications, he started helping out at bodybuilding events like Mr. Olympia. Tsoukalos was everywhere organizing, promoting, and making sure things went as smoothly as possible. For years, he worked as the official translator for all non-English speaking athletes for the International Federation of Bodybuilders. Not surprising since he can speak 5 languages fluently, including English, German, French, Italian, and Greek. He also knows a lot of Spanish. Before long, he moved up as a promoter of IFBB-sanctioned bodybuilding contests, including Mr. Olympia. He also worked at professional bodybuilding contests all around the world, including the Arnold Schwarzenegger Classic and Olympia Weekend. After learning how things work, he took over a new promotion company, the San Francisco Pro Grand Prix in California. Working as both the lead promoter and contest director of the business, he soon built it up into one of the biggest bodybuilding events in the state, with top athletes and reporters coming from all over the world. In fact, Ronnie Coleman, seen by many as the greatest bodybuilder of all time, is on record saying nice things about the young Tsoukalos for helping make the sport more popular. With this history, it is impossible to argue that Tsoukalos isn't a hard worker, especially when you realize that while he was busy with the business of bodybuilding, he was working on something completely different in secret. You would have thought that the problems of being an adult would have completely erased any childhood interests. This wasn't the case for Tsoukalos, who at almost 30 years old had somehow kept his childhood interests alive and was actively working on them. As a child, Tsoukalos loved stories about gods and aliens. As an adult, he was studying if they actually existed. In 1998, already an expert and speaker in the ancient astronaut field, Tsoukalos created the world's only ambiscient astronaut research journal, Legendary Times magazine. He also opened Legendary Times Books, an online ancient astronaut and ancient mysteries bookstore. Later in 2005, he had decided to open the online bookstore after realizing that people who were interested in those topics couldn't walk into any ordinary bookstore and find books on them. So, he set up the online store with open access to every controversial and uncensored book on ancient astronauts, and his Legendary Times magazine was filled with special research articles written by many top researchers, some of whom he knew well. The magazine was focused on the idea that ancient aliens might have visited Earth in the past. The magazine was the only publication in the world that focused entirely on the ancient astronaut theory. Honestly, it was something no one had ever seen before. In it, writers were asking questions people had never asked or were too uncomfortable to ask. Questions like, what if the gods people worshipped a long time ago were actually aliens? What if these visitors from space helped build some of the incredible structures that had left historians confused? Tsoukalos, as the editor-in-chief, the publisher, and the face of the paper, even laid out scientific methods for research into these questions. But what really made the paper popular was how Tsoukalos made everything simple and easy to understand. People who didn't have much education were included. 3 years after starting the online store, almost everyone who had an interest in aliens had visited the store. It had become a major authority on ancient astronaut theory. However, for Tsoukalos, this wasn't the time to sit back and relax. He was going to take a bold step, one very few saw coming. After reading Chariot of the Gods as a kid, the young Tsoukalos must have thought the author was the greatest person ever to walk the earth. At the time, Erich von Däniken, the man who wrote the book, was probably living the time of his life, thanks to how well his bestseller was doing in the market. These two at different points in their life would never have imagined that one day they would meet, not to mention working together at any point in their lives. Von Däniken was probably impressed by Tsoukalos's achievements in the bodybuilding business. He must have been also impressed by the fact that the man could speak 5 languages and was good at the 6th. But what he would be most impressed about was Tsoukalos's amazing dedication to what he believed in. With his favorite author on his team, Tsoukalos hit the gas without thinking twice. He even became the director of von Däniken Center for Ancient Astronaut Research. Together, they planned out how they were going to take the legendary Times magazine to the next level. The team continued detailed study of ancient writings, ancient drawings, and mysterious archaeological monuments and artifacts. They wrote articles about the topic which appeared in publications all around the world. They even did research, collected real data, and found strong supporting evidence for the ancient astronaut idea. When outside criticism came pouring in from scientists and others like them, the team stayed strong, and eventually this sticking with it paid off. TV came calling. This wasn't the first time Tsoukalos would find himself on television. He had appeared in programs shown by Travel Channel, History Channel, Sci-Fi, and National Geographic at different times. So this wasn't new to him. What was new was that this was the first time he would be producing his own show, doing what he wanted to do from day one. In 2009, the first episode of the show called Ancient Aliens aired on History Channel. The audience couldn't believe what was on their screens. The man with the wild hairstyle talking about a topic most people dismissed as crazy talk and saying it with confidence. It pulled people in, and the first episode got over 1 million viewers. Ancient Aliens was an instant hit. While Tsoukalos worked as consulting producer and a featured guest, Kevin Burns was executive producer, and UFO researcher Scott Littleton worked as a producing consultant during the series development. The team, which also included people like writer David Childress, got inspiration from Worksby, you guessed it, von Däniken, and a couple of other well-known authors in the field of alien history. The show went on to air more than 200 episodes, and Tsoukalos appeared in them all. He even presented and co-produced another H2 series titled In Search of Aliens, and with fame came more fame. He also became a regular guest on Coast to Coast AM, a late-night radio show that had millions of listeners who wanted to hear more about ideas that were thought of as too strange or too weird. But with more fame came more checking up on him, this time by people who you expected to have the answers. Scientists, historians, space experts, and archaeologists openly criticized everything Tsoukalos stood for about aliens. These educated people claimed he was presenting and promoting fake science, fake history, and fake archaeology as fact. One critic wrote about Ancient Aliens, "There are no depths to which the show won't sink to lie to you. If you watch this show, believe nothing you're told. It on purpose presents false facts and information as true to build off it, and will take quotes completely out of context to change their meaning." Another person said about the show, "At best it's silly entertainment. At worst, it's money-grabbing lying nonsense. What bugs me is that the people who regularly host the show are making fortunes off lies. To make fans of the show understand that they weren't saying these things to simply attack." Tsoukalos. Some critics described the show host as a nice guy, who clearly had a lot of energy But in their opinion, that energy was wasted on totally lying to fans. Other critics felt the show was just too dismissive of the work of humans. If aliens built all the technological advancements that brought humanity this far, then it meant we didn't do anything because we couldn't. Such a depressingly sad picture of the human race wasn't something that sat well with a lot of people. Some disliked the show so much that they described it as downright offensive. But of course, on the other side of the coin were people who loved the show and its host. Comments like, "I love your show, I never miss an episode," were posted frequently on the social media pages. People even asked Tsoukalos fun questions like, "If you were taken by aliens, what would you most like to ask them?" Despite the controversies, however, Tsoukalos remained unfazed. Even when the meme-ification happened, he found a way to put a positive spin on it. Meme-ification is when a person is turned into an internet meme. Most of the time, it is often because they said something funny or reacted to something shocking. But in the case of Tsoukalos, fans couldn't shake the feeling that his meme was a joke on him and what he stood for. It started when 4chan users found it funny that this man with the bizarre spiky hairstyle was seriously talking about aliens with full confidence, too. They couldn't understand how he chose to credit the aliens with every weird or strange thing, even when there wasn't proof to back it up. So, the internet made memes with a freeze frame of him and the phrase, "I'm not saying it was aliens, but it was aliens." Truth be told, nobody is even sure if he actually said those words. But that phrase went viral on social media and was often used to make fun of ancient aliens' ideas. People would use the meme when they wanted to react to any idea that seemed too out there or crazy. Despite all of this, Tsoukalos insisted that it was a great honor to have been turned into a meme and shared endlessly on the internet. Hess stated, "I think it's wonderful, the fan base. I have the best fans in the world," adding that his meme-ification is proof that people have really embraced his show and his ideas. Whatever level his fame was before the meme went viral, it was nothing compared to the fame that came after. Tsoukalos was practically a global celebrity. He got invites for interviews outside the US, and when the interviewers decided to keep their questions around the viral meme, he just went along with them. It was clear that he had realized something others didn't get. Even bad publicity was publicity all the same, and a TV show that was limited by location could not have delivered there, as this viral meme had delivered. It didn't stop there. Tsoukalos found himself making a cameo in Resident Alien on the SYFY channel. In the episode, he was still the high-haired gentleman giving a lecture about ancient masonry and aliens. He even appeared again in another episode of the show just a year later. Talk about representing your brand, come rain or shine. And this was his shine hour. That same year, he faced professors at an Oxford Union debate. Despite them coming at him with all they got, he didn't budge an inch. He claimed in his argument that many discoveries were being hidden and pointed out that mainstream archaeology was ignoring quite a lot too, because admitting some of these discoveries would lead to chaos and pull down the house of cards. These scientists have so carefully stacked up, and every time somebody made a point to criticize him, he asked them if his ideas were just a waste of time. Then why were the critics feeling so threatened? The boost from the debate got him a seat on big podcasts like the Joe Rogan Experience show, where he shared his beliefs without any loss of face. It was his 2 appearances on this show that cemented a number of things for Tsoukalos. Each of his 2 appearances on the show lasted over 2 hours, and it gave him time to really go in depth and explain most of these so-called crazy theories that had made him a joke to some people. The Joe Rogan Experience boasted tens of millions of listeners, most of them from the younger generation who no longer sit and watch TV shows. Their food for any serious topic comes from podcasts like Rogan's Experience. So, you can imagine how interesting it must be for them to hear someone talk openly about an alternate history completely different from what everyone learned in school. This appearance on the Rogan Experience went viral, and Tsoukalos was no longer just that ancient aliens meme guy, but a thought-provoking speaker. But the idea of just being a speaker wasn't all that comfortable for Tsoukalos. He wanted to be more. So he started Ancient Aliens Live to go on tour so he, his team, and people like Nick Pope and David Childress could talk directly to fans across the country. He wasn't just sticking to the US. He got invitations to be a major speaker at conventions and conferences worldwide. What made him everyone's first choice was that he was one of the few who had actually led adventure tours to places that had alien controversies. In fact, he reported that he had a personal experience of visitors from outer space. According to him, the incident occurred in 2014, while he was attending a UFO conference at Joshua Tree National Park in California. He claimed that he and dozens of other people looked up at the night sky and saw stars inside the Big Dipper, which obviously didn't belong there, adding that the stars moved around before disappearing. In his words, those two things most certainly were not meteors because they were flying up and not towards the Earth, and they weren't satellites because they disappeared into space. So fans chose him because he wasn't just repeating someone else's experiences after he had read them from a book. Critics had faced him and found him sticking to what he believed even at the risk of being called crazy. At one point he has said, "I am the first one to admit that what I am talking about is crazy or can be seen as crazy. If in this day and age asking questions means that you're crazy, then I admit I am the craziest of them all." In his adoring audience's eyes, this is why Tsoukalos remains the ancient aliens guy.